Episode 3: The Strike, Targets, Messages, and the Real Goal Behind the Bombs. June 13th, 2025, 3:40 a.m. The first Israeli F-35s crossed into Iranian airspace. Within minutes, the skies over central Iran erupted with precision strikes. By the time most of Tehran was waking up, 3 of the country's most sensitive nuclear facilities had already been hit. The operation was clean, ruthless, and far more than just military. This was not just about uranium. It was about psychological warfare, political timing, and rewriting the rules of engagement in broad daylight. The official reason: stop the bomb. Israel wasted no time giving its justification. "We acted in self-defense," said Prime Minister David Barak. Iran had reached the 90% uranium enrichment threshold. "We could not wait." The Israeli government claimed that new intelligence proved Iran was days away from achieving nuclear breakout capability, the final step before building a nuclear bomb. But that intelligence was never shared publicly, and the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, not confirmed such enrichment levels. Critics argued, was this really about imminent threat or about asserting dominance while the global spotlight was elsewhere? The targets, more than just concrete. The strikes weren't random. They were symbolic, strategic. Natanz, Iran's main uranium enrichment facility, previously attacked by cyber weapons like Stuxnet, now hit by real explosives. Fordo, a facility buried deep under a mountain, chosen to prove that not even fortified bunkers were safe. Isfahan, a hub of nuclear research and fuel production, reduced to fire and silence. But there was another layer. Cyber units launched simultaneous attacks on radar and air defense systems. Iran's early warning network was blind for nearly 90 minutes. This wasn't just about destruction. It was about humiliation. The real message: we know your weak points. We can reach you, and we're not afraid to act. Iran strikes back. 24 hours later, Iran responded, and they made sure the world was watching. Over 40 missiles launched toward southern Israel. Some intercepted, some not. One struck a hospital in Ashkelon. Another hit a refinery in Haifa. It was Iran's way of saying, "You're not untouchable." Then came the escalation. Iran's proxy forces in Lebanon and Syria, Hezbollah and others, began firing rockets at Israeli positions. At the same time, cyberattacks flooded Israeli banking websites and disabled parts of the national grid for hours. This wasn't a full-scale war. Not yet. But it was no longer a cold conflict either. Enter the United States, from silent partner to leading actor. On June 22nd, the U.S. launched Operation Midnight Hammer. It was the first direct American military strike on Iranian soil in over 20 years. B-2 bombers flew from European bases. Tomahawk cruise missiles were fired from submarines in the Arabian Sea. Electronic warfare teams jammed Iranian communication and surveillance. The targets? 3 additional nuclear infrastructure points believed to house new generation centrifuges. The Pentagon said, "These strikes are necessary to prevent Iran from rebuilding its nuclear capacity." This is not a declaration of war, it's a message. But the world saw something else. The world's most powerful military just joined a regional conflict. with no UN mandate, no coalition, no public warning. Behind the scenes, was this coordinated? Despite official denials, evidence suggested Israel and the U.S. had planned this together. Israeli aircraft used air corridors temporarily cleared by U.S. Gulf allies. American cyber units preemptively disrupted Iranian GPS systems hours before the U.S. strike. Israel paused further attacks just as the U.S. entered, like a synchronized relay. If true, it meant something far more dangerous. The two allies weren't reacting. They were executing a strategy. Together, more than missiles, what was the real goal? At its core, this campaign was not just about destruction. It was about reshaping the regional balance of power. Israel wanted to delay Iran's nuclear program, signal strength to its Arab neighbors, prove that it doesn't need permission to act. The U.S. wanted to regain lost influence in the region, send a warning to China and Russia, reinforce deterrence without deploying troops, and both wanted to test. How far can we go before the world says stop? So far, the world watched and stayed silent. In the next episode, we'll step into the uneasy silence that followed, the ceasefire, the conflicting claims, and the question on every strategist's mind. Is this peace or just the eye of the storm? Episode 4. Ceasefire or Countdown? Coming next. Episode 4. Ceasefire or Countdown? On June 23, 2025, President Donald Trump addressed the nation. With flags behind him and cameras rolling, he announced what the world had been hoping to hear. We've secured a ceasefire between Israel and Iran. The fighting has stopped. Diplomacy is working, but behind the polished statement was a different reality. There was no formal agreement, no treaty, no handshake, only a fragile silence. And in the Middle East, silence often comes before the next storm. The ceasefire that no one signed. What President Trump called a ceasefire was, in truth, a political pause brokered through two secret channels. A phone call between Trump and Israeli Prime Minister David Barak. A covert meeting in Amman between American envoys and Iranian diplomats with Swiss intermediaries. But within hours, Iran's foreign ministry pushed back. We have not agreed to any ceasefire. We are simply suspending operations conditionally. No joint statement, no UN supervision, no public commitment. It was at best a mutual breath held in uncertainty. A tactical freeze, not peace. In the days that followed, Israel halted its airstrikes but kept its air force on red alert. Iran paused its missile launches but moved Revolutionary Guard units closer to Iraq and Syria. The U.S. withdrew its carrier strike group slightly, but left bombers and air defense systems in place. It was not de-escalation. It was a strategic chess clock, ticking down while both sides reloaded. 3 countries, 3 stories, Israel declared victory. Barak told his cabinet, "The threat has been neutralized. We remain ready if Iran reactivates its program." Iran, meanwhile, called the strike illegal, but insisted its resistance remains unbroken. President Larijani stated, "We do not seek war, but we are not done." And the U.S. split between triumph and concern. Publicly, Trump celebrated restraint. Privately, Pentagon officials warned that Iran's silence might not be surrender, but strategy. The world reacts or doesn't. Russia and China criticized the strikes, but stopped short of real intervention. The EU was divided, some calling for diplomacy, others quietly supporting U.S. pressure. In the Arab world, Saudi Arabia stayed silent, a silence that said more than words. Qatar and Oman offered to mediate. Turkey warned of destabilization, but made no real move. The international community, for all its rhetoric, had entered wait-and-see mode. Still in the red zone, three things made this peace dangerously fragile. No monitoring mechanism. The II hadn't resumed inspections. No one knew if Iran was rebuilding. No guarantees. There was no framework, just political will, which can shift overnight. No trust. Iran still saw Israel as an aggressor. Israel still saw Iran as a ticking bomb. The U saw both as unpredictable. Everyone stayed quiet, but no one relaxed. What was the U.S. really after? Some analysts say Trump had pulled off a masterstroke. Strike hard. Pause fast. Negotiate from strength. Others weren't so sure. Was this about Iran, or about sending a message to China, to Russia, to North Korea? Was this a peace effort or just a recalibration of leverage? One thing was clear. The United States had reshuffled the board, but the pieces were still moving. Ceasefire or countdown? Here's the hard truth. Ceasefires without trust are just intermissions in a longer war. Israel isn't disarming. Iran isn't backing down. And America isn't leaving. This isn't the end. It's a reset. And whether it leads to diplomacy or detonation will depend on decisions made in the weeks ahead. In the next episode, we'll take a wider look. How did this brief war reshape the Middle East? Who's rising, who's retreating, and what does it mean for the next regional crisis? Join us for Episode 5, New Lines, Old Wars, A Region Rewired.